As the hours passed in that bleak sanctuary, our conversation spiraled into fevered theories and desperate attempts to piece together the town's myriad enigmas. Marcus suggested that Graven Hollow was not meant to adhere to the maps of our world. Instead, it existed in a hidden overlay, a parallel domain that our mortal eyes were never meant to penetrate. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine at his words, for they resonated with the fragmented narratives I had stumbled upon in the mansion's diaries. The notion of a town thriving in the liminal space between reality and nightmare was incomprehensible, yet hauntingly familiar. Our refuge did not last long. At some ominous point during the night, the oppressive silence was shattered by a sound that chilled me to the core, a prolonged, keening wail that echoed through vacant corridors and seeped into my very soul. Marcus's grip tightened on my arm, and we exchanged a look of shared terror. It was as if that sound had been the harbinger of something far more insidious, a call to awaken a force that had long been dormant beneath the foundations of Graven Hollow. Determined to uncover the truth, Marcus and I crept back into the storm-soaked streets. The thunder rolled overhead like the beating of enormous, unseen hearts, and the rain lashed the pavement like the fury of unbridled spirits. We followed the phantom wail to a forgotten graveyard at the town's edge, a place where tombstones jutted out of the earth like jagged reminders of the past. There, beneath the oppressive tomb of a family whose name had been erased by time, we discovered cryptic carvings and symbols chiseled into stone. They spoke of an ancient covenant, of spirits restless in their vigil, and of a curse placed upon the very land we now trod. I knelt before the cold stones and placed my hand against one etched with spiraling sigils, feeling as though I were touching the very heart of darkness. In that moment, memories and dread converged in a storm of realization. I had become part of something vast and incomprehensible, a tapestry woven from both past and future horrors. The lines between the living and the dead, the real and the imagined, had blurred into a single unified curse, a curse that pried open the gates between worlds. I shuddered as I recalled the journal's strewn entries about an entity known only as the Keeper, a being said to preside over Graven Hollow's fate, watching, waiting for souls to be claimed when the time was right. The following days turned into a relentless procession of surreal encounters and unnerving phenomena. Marcus and I scoured every cranny of the town, seeking fragments of history that might explain the inexplicable. We found ourselves in a dusty, antique shop filled with trinkets that whispered of lives lost to time and objects whose origins defied explanation. An old phonograph in the corner played a scratchy tune, a melody so haunting it sent tremors down my spine. The rooms of that shop were cramped like mausoleums, every artifact a relic of unrecorded horrors. I became fixated on the belief that somewhere in Graven Hollow lay the key to the Keeper's identity, a truth that would cast light upon the darkness that had gripped the town for generations. In one dark recess of an attic in a decrepit house, hidden behind piles of yellowed newspapers and broken furniture, I discovered a leather-bound ledger. Its pages detailed ritualistic symbols and dates scrawled in a spidery hand. Each entry recorded a sequence of events that culminated in unexplained disappearances, tragic accidents, and a relentless descent into unfamiliar madness. There were mentions of midnight congregations, of ceremonies that summoned forth an indescribable presence, and of a pact forged in blood and despair. I couldn't help but feel that I was tracing the fingerprints of a malevolent design, one that stretched far beyond this haunted town and seeped into the history of our collective souls. As I pieced together these fragments, a horrifying possibility emerged. Graven Hollow was not merely cursed, it was alive, a sentient force determined to guard its secrets at any cost. Every door I opened, every corner of the town I explored, seemed to pulse with a malignant purpose. Marcus, too, began to exhibit signs of despair, his eyes increasingly shadowed by the knowledge of what lurked beyond the veil. In quiet, desperate. Moments, he confided that he sometimes felt as though his thoughts were no longer entirely his own, as though the town was whispering dark truths into the recesses of his mind. One October morning, if one could call the inhuman twilight that followed the storm morning, we decided to confront the heart of the town. Armed with our notes, our scant belongings, and a determination born of sheer terror, we ventured toward a hill that loomed in the distance like an omen. On top of that hill, shrouded in swirling mist, there stood the ruins of an ancient chapel, the epicenter, by all accounts, of Graven Hollow's malevolence. I felt a magnetic pull driving my feet upward, as if the very ground beneath me was urging me to confront what lay hidden behind its crumbling stone walls. The hill itself was treacherous, the path narrowing into a ragged trail bordered by gnarled trees whose twisted branches reached out like skeletal arms. With each step upward, the whispers grew louder, a susurrus of voices urging, warning, and beckoning me into the darkness. Marcus and I exchanged grave looks as we ascended, the horror of the unknown pressed against our chests. At the summit, before the ruined chapel, the air seemed to shiver with both agony and anticipation. The building's facade was a tapestry of moss and decay, its once sacred inscriptions eroded by time and neglect. Yet, in the shattered remnants of stained glass, I saw images of eyes. Watchful, sorrowful eyes that seemed to weep for humanity lost to the maw of the abyss. Stepping inside was like entering a realm where the rules of physics no longer applied. The interior was an endless expanse of shifting shadows and echoes of prayers long since silenced. I felt as though I had become part of the edifice itself, a ghost wandering corridors of a mausoleum that no longer adhered to the boundaries of mortality. In the center of the chapel, on what remained of an altar, lay a ritual circle still marked by deep incisions in the stone floor. Marcus knelt beside me, tracing the symbols with trembling fingers as he murmured theories about the true nature of the pact that held Graven Hollow in its grip. In that suspended moment, the air thick with dread, I felt the presence of the Keeper, an ancient consciousness that had been waiting in the wings, patient and unyielding. A sudden, jarring sound shattered the oppressive stillness, a metallic clang that reverberated through the ruined walls and sent shockwaves through my very soul. The ground beneath us trembled, and I was struck by an overwhelming sensation of being surrounded by countless unseen eyes. The ritual circle began to glow with a sickly, pulsating light. I can still hear the sound, the heartbeat of the town itself, quickening as if heralding the inevitable approach of an ancient reckoning. The glow spread outward from the circle, illuminating hidden alcoves and secret passages that I had never noticed before. Every step, every breath was drowned in the hum of that unholy rhythm. And then the Keeper revealed itself, not as a monstrous apparition or a specter of gore, but as a presence, a swirling eddy of shadow and light, indescribable yet unmistakable in its intent to invoke both fascination and abject terror. I felt as though hundreds of unseen hands pressed against my skin, their touch cold and accusing. The Keeper's voice, if it could be called a voice, resonated within the depths of my mind, a symphony of despair and timeless sorrow. It spoke, in riddles of lost souls, of a time when the town was whole, and of the price that must be paid for trespassing into realms reserved for the dead. In that moment of paralyzing fear, Marcus cried out for us to flee. But no matter how desperately I clutched at the desire to escape, I found that I was rooted to the spot. The Keeper's presence filled the ruined chapel, swallowing the fractured remnants of the past and forging them into an inescapable present. I could not tell where my will ended and the town's ancient hunger began. The ensuing experience is difficult to recount in mere words, each moment an eternity of horror and despair. I remember a sensation of being lifted, of my body untethered, as I was drawn deeper into the swirling vortex of Graven Hollow's soul. For what felt like an endless duration, I wandered through memories not my own, visions of great calamities, of joyous celebrations turned bitter by loss, and of lives hopelessly entwined with the curse of the town. In these visions, I saw faces staring into mine, eyes pleading for salvation that would never come. Each soul was chained to Graven Hollow by an unbreakable covenant, and as I bore witness, I felt that fate was drawing inexorably towards my own doom. When I finally found the strength to tear my gaze away, I was alone, but forever changed. The keeper receded into the stone and shadows, leaving behind a silence that screamed with the weight of all unspoken sorrows. Marcus was gone. In my frantic search for him later that night, I discovered only a single, solitary shoe near the edge of the graveyard. It seemed as though he had been swallowed by the darkness, a casualty of the ancient pact that held the town